somewhere. I don't know who gave it to me or who placed it, but it.
Okay, I'm gonna listen to this.
Hi.
Hi, Don. Tom.
Hello, everyone. Barb, how are you? Barb Wybrecht.
Oh, hey, Barb.
Hi. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Well, I don't see you, but it's good to have you on, hear your voice.
Oh, you can't see me?
Oh,
Well, let me see what I need to do.
Give everybody the opportunity. Hello, everyone. Hi, this is Tom Donaldson at NOFAS. Thank you for joining us. Good afternoon or good morning. I know we have people all the way, certainly in California, but Hawaii and Alaska. We will get started in just a moment. We still have many people entering the meeting, and we want to give people a chance to just get their cameras on and get situated, and then we will get started.
this is the National NOFAS. They're trying to get funding. National. That's, it's a flower. Because I want one.
At the grocery store?
Yeah, it's a bulb and I'm not sure.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll get started. We're just a moment or two after the hour, and we still have people coming in. Let me ask that everybody mute yourself, please, while we are presenting. And just quickly, we have probably about a half an hour of presentation for you from various members of the NOFAS legislative and policy team. And then we have plenty of time for an open discussion to talk about what we have before us this year, what we want to try to accomplish, and the role that we all need to play. So there'll be an opportunity for you to speak, to ask questions, to share your experiences with the group. So again, as I said, I'm Tom Donaldson with NOFAS, and this is a new sort of policy and training forum that we're going to be doing every month. It will be on the last Wednesday of each month at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we will do this until we get FASD passed federally and in every state and addressed as it needs to be, as it must be. So we hope that this is the beginning of this major push for success. And if you miss any of the meetings, they will be posted on the NOFAS website. From the NOFAS website, there is a new tab in the navigation bar, Policy and Training Center. And so you'll just click that and you'll be able to find information about these meetings, the status of our outreach, and see the recordings, look and hear the recordings. So this is terrific. We have over 40 people and expect more to join. And I want to just take a moment for those of you who may not be as familiar with NOFAS and share a couple of notes. We are now into our second set of 30 years, having recognized the 30-year anniversary in 2020. And really all that NOFAS does boils down to, awareness and education and advocacy. And I think it's of primary importance to note that the first thing is that if somebody is looking for resources, now they may not always exist, but they can contact NOFAS, as they can contact any NOFAS affiliate to find at least the best resources in the state. And there are many folks who will work with and are supportive from across the country, even if you're not in the same geographic. Secondly, in addition to those who are directly touched by FASD, are women and their partners and families and communities who are affected by prenatal alcohol exposure. They may have difficulty setting aside the alcohol. So focusing on those individuals who may have an alcohol use disorder is another priority of NOFAS. And just quickly, this montage of images which help to portray some of what we're doing. Perhaps most important to the work we're talking about today and this field is the NOFAS Affiliate Network. There gives you a sense of where there are current affiliates. It's a priority now to recruit new organizations who want to be in every state and in every market, in every community, and not only have a presence, but work to strengthen the programs and the capacity of each of those organizations. I hope you receive the NOFAS Weekly Roundup. It comes out every Monday afternoon with news and information, including the latest research and features regarding FASD. You see there in the lower left corner, the Policy and Training Center. This is something that NOFAS has worked on for many, many years and more formalizing the work through the center. Also, the Justice Task Force. Needless to say, this is an important issue within our field, and increasingly professionals are coming together as part of the task force to support families whose may have a loved one facing criminal proceedings, but also think about legal briefs and education for the personnel in the juvenile criminal justice systems. The Collaborative for Alcohol-Free Pregnancy NOFAS works with. This is the CDC supported collaborative to, as you can see there, that is focused on practice change among discipline-specific professionals. So many of you know Kathy Mitchell and her Warrior Moms and Birth Mother Network, the Circle of Hope, has been something for 15 years or more that NOFAS is focused on in an effort to reduce stigma surrounding this issue. And then lastly, I'll mention there at the bottom center, the Collaborative Initiative on Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorders. This is the coalition run by our friend and NOFAS board member Ed Riley, and supported by the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism. NIAAA conducts, I believe it's somewhere around 90% of the global clinical and biomedical research on FASD, and NOFAS is involved with them. So there's just a quick overview of what NOFAS is focused on. And now I want to turn this meeting over to the chair of the NOFAS legislative and policy effort, friend of many of yours, Susan Carlson.
Thanks, Tom. I just want to welcome everybody to the first forum of the NOFAS Policy and Training Center. I got involved in this issue back in 1997 as a result of my work as a juvenile court referee when I was First Lady of Minnesota. And if you told me back in 1997 that in 2021, I'd still be at it, I would have said, what? And you wonder why. And there's a lot of us like that out there that you get involved and it just stays with you. My whole career in this has been a volunteer career. But I would say if you wanted to describe me, I would say chief policy wonk, because I love public policy, and I've worked in the state legislative arena. I was in the judicial branch. My husband, I did a lot of work for the administration, and then I also was on the justice work group for the ICC FASD. And one thing you learn with this issue, there's a lot of acronyms, so that's what you got to start learning. So and now I'm on the board of NOFAS and chair of the policy committee. And so our purpose, you can see there, is to lead the effort for the wide FASD community, because it's one of the things that through all of my years of experience, it seems like there's so many people out there that want to make progress, but we need that leadership at the top. I go to a quote from Helen Keller that I think tells us so much. And the quote was, "Alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much." And that's the purpose of this group, to bring people together to achieve desirable public policy outcomes on behalf of individuals living with FASD. And so I actually looked up public policy because I think we use that a lot and people think, oh, well, that's not, why would I want to know anything about public policy? But the definition is public policy is a course of action created and enacted typically by a government in response to public real world problems. And government cannot solve the problems without that input from those that are impacted by those policies. And I think what this forum will hopefully do will bring the heart together with the head, and will provide, and goals you see is to give you the knowledge and the tools so you all can help us change public policy in FASD. So Tom, you can change the slide to the, we're going to have, Tom talked about the monthly forum, and I don't know that it'll be as content rich as this one. We've got a lot of material, and as Tom said, it'll be on the website, but this will basically be the agenda, and it could change. We could have experts, FASD experts or agency experts, but it's always going to be content rich for you. So if you're not able to tune in on Wednesday, the last Wednesday, please check the website. And always we want to make sure that we get the input, because we can do it at, we can be the experts at the top, but we need your help. And I do need to say, we're fortunate with our team to have on our policy team and leadership team dedicated people on this issue, and also with work on the Hill. So I'm very excited. So I'll turn it over to Tom now, who'll talk about the history and current response of FASD in the federal government.
Thank you, Susan. Just as a reminder for some, but to share with everyone what is currently happening, let's go through the agencies that have funding specifically for FASD and are addressing the issue. The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, which is a component of the National Institutes of Health, has addressed FAS or FASD for 50 years almost. They've been around for 50 years, and I think since 1973, they have been funding this issue. And you can see in their fiscal year 2020, approximately $29.4 million is dedicated to, and we mentioned earlier the Collaborative Initiative on FASD, this Collaboration on FASD Prevalence Consortium. That's the shop through which Phil May and Tina Chambers and others and their partners put out the prevalence data that so many of us use. And then, of course, the ICC FASD Interagency Coordinating Committee has been around for about 25 years. And just as a reminder, you can watch their proceedings when they're televised by the NIH web streaming service, and you get the reminders from the NOFAS roundup when that appears. I should mention NIAAA is the only agency that actually spends and dedicates more money to FASD than they have appropriated for that purpose. CDC, about $11 million dedicated to FASD. Mentioned earlier that the Collaborative for Alcohol-Free Pregnancy is a major initiative of theirs. Also, screening and intervention training for alcohol, so alcohol screening in clinical settings. They're seeking to make that part of routine clinical practice. You see their lower right is just a depiction of the US map, where they have data on the number of women who consume any alcohol or heavy and binge drinking during pregnancy. So they collect that data. And then also, for instance, they publish the clinical guidelines for FASD. HRSA is the only, and that's the Health Resources and Services Administration. All these agencies are part of the Federal Department of Health Services. Let me break for a second, just remind everyone, please mute yourself during the presentation. They have just $1 million. For many years, HRSA has had very little funding, which was disseminated in a single grant, really for most of the years of less than $500,000 through the work of NOFAS and some advocates in key congressional offices. We're able to get a little bit more money, and that funding is now going to a project you see there, supporting fetal alcohol spectrum disorders screening and intervention program. And we're thrilled that at least two of the NOFAS affiliates in Massachusetts and of course Proof Alliance in Minnesota are involved in that important effort. And lastly, before I pass it on, the presentation on to one of my colleagues, let's just take a quick look at FASD federal funding. If you go back 25 years, you can see, as I mentioned, NIAAA has been funding the basic research, did have some success legislatively, and so that in fiscal year 2000, for the first time, we had SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. You see there in the green bar had funding, as well as CDC, and that was consistent for several years until I think the greatest variances you've seen, which we're pleased about, the dramatic increase in support at NIAAA, but of very significant concern is the loss of funding at SAMHSA. As you can see, that was reduced significantly and now has been zeroed out, and there is no focus on FASD at SAMHSA at the moment. And you see, as I refer to, the very modest funding at HRSA. As you'll hear, though, when Susan rejoins us and we talk about what is planned in new legislation, HRSA will be a significant factor there. Okay, now I want to turn the presentation over to the chair of the NOFAS Board of Directors, Kate Boyce, who has a long history both working both sides of many issues on Capitol Hill and as individual here in Washington, representing many interests. And I can say she's, for probably as long as I've been around here, also represented the interests of NOFAS and led to many of our successes. So Kate, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. And I see that we do have several folks from Washington State and California. I'm delighted because you guys are going to be very key to what we're going to try to accomplish in the 117th Congress. As Tom mentioned, I'm board chair and have been for quite a while. I practiced law, public policy, and Indian law for about 37 years in a law firm here in Washington, D.C. Now I have my own consulting firm, but I've always been in the public policy and legislative arena, and I've helped NOFAS as board, also as on a pro bono basis when I was practicing law. And so it just, as Susan says, it just gets into your system and you just keep on going. So you'll see this schema here. I'm going to just explain this briefly. Probably, I'm sure most of you all know this, but we have a bicameral legislative arrangement in our three branches of government. The legislative branch is divided into the Senate and the House, 2 senators in each state. The House is divided based on population. In the Senate, we now have a power sharing arrangement with basically a 50-50 split, but because Vice President Kamala Harris can vote with the Democrats on the Senate floor, the Democrats are in control. So we now have Democrats who will be leading the committees. They still are figuring out who's going to be on which committees and so forth. They'll have to rejigger them because the change of membership in the overall body. But we do know that Senator Patty Murray will chair the Health, Education, Labor and Pensions Committee, otherwise known as the HELP Committee. And she's also likely to chair the Labor HHS Appropriations Subcommittee. So she is a major player in this arena. And she has been a co-sponsor of earlier FASD legislation. So we are hoping that she will be helpful in getting our legislation moving and through the Congress, and Susan Carlson is going to speak to that a little bit later. In the House, we have the Democrats are also in control there and chair the committees. But we have it's a narrower majority than in the last Congress, but we still have a Democratic majority. Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut, who chaired previously the Labor HHS Appropriations Subcommittee, will be taking over the full committee. So she's going to be pretty powerful in this Congress, and she still will maintain her chairmanship of the Labor HHS Appropriations. And she's been favorably disposed to our issues, which is good. And the chairman of the committee that with jurisdiction over the over authorization legislation is Frank Pallone from New Jersey. He's been in that position for a long time, and he's also on the health subcommittee. He was a co-chair of the FASD caucus when we had such a caucus in the House, along with, he co-chaired that with Don Young, congressman from Alaska. So we're in relatively good shape in terms of committee leadership. We just need to make the process move more quickly than it did last year, which COVID really put a lot of brakes on the process in many walks of life, as we all know. Anyway, so here's sort of a schematic of the way the legislative process works. Just in generally speaking, when you have a bill that starts with an idea and legislation, all the funding that Chom just walked through with you, or most of it, resulted from FASD legislation that was enacted back in the late 1990s. Some of those authorities have expired. Some of the funding has continued, as he pointed out, but some has not continued. And so we're looking to try to get some of those programs reauthorized. But in any case, a bill, an idea goes into a bill can be introduced in the Senate or House or both. We introduced the FASD bill in both at the House and Senate last Congress. After a bill is introduced, the normal process is that it goes through hearings in committee. It gets referred to a committee, it goes through hearings, goes through an amendment process. If there are any amendments, the committee considers it, votes on it, reports it to the full body of the Senate or the House. Further amendments can take place there, or if it's a non-controversial bill, it's usually considered in the House in a sort of a more expedited process. Same thing can happen in the Senate with slightly different rules. But bottom line is that in order for a bill to become law, it has to be passed in the same form with the same language by both the House and Senate. So if there are no amendments, it's a quicker process because you don't have to reconcile different House and Senate bills. You can just, both bodies can pass the same bill and it goes to the president for signature. If there are amendments, then and so such the legislation passes in different forms in the House and versus the Senate, then the bill goes to a conference committee with representatives from the two committees of jurisdiction on the Senate and the House side. They sit down in conference, they work out the differences so that they have one final version of the legislation. That version has to go back to the House and to the Senate to be passed, and then it can go to the president for signature. So that's the general way that authorization legislation passes. In the budget arena, we call those appropriations. There is a Senate Appropriations Committee and a House Appropriations Committee. Those are very powerful committees because they deal with all the funding decisions. The just to back up for a second, authorization legislation is basically we're setting up the parameters, we're authorizing the government to do this, that, and the other thing. It's permission, but it's not funding. An authorization bill can say, we want $10 million for this program, but that's just authorization. In order for the funding actually to be approved, the Appropriations Committee has to bless the amount of money, whether it's 10 million or less or more. So for the funding process, that normally starts with, in the executive branch, with the White House, and the different agencies will put together their wish list of funding for their programs. That goes to the Office of Management and Budget within the White House. They crunch their numbers, and they will go back to the agencies and say, no, we're not going to give you that much, or we want more to spend in this area. Ultimately, the president's budget is put together with budget requests, it's called. And the president's budget goes up to the Hill, to the Congress, and then the different committees will start working on that budget. I think the process is going to be quite delayed this year because of the lateness of the Congress getting going, and it's usually later anyway when there's a change in administration. But so the Trump administration would have put together some figures coming up from the agencies, but they'll probably, the Biden people will chew on that and come up with some different numbers. But in any case, what is supposed to happen is that the president's budget goes to the Hill. The House and Senate budget committees are supposed to come up with what they call a budget resolution, which is basically how much money should be allocated to different accounts within the federal budget. It's the House and Senate spin on what the federal budget should look like for that particular fiscal year. Supposedly a budget resolution is passed, which governs how the House and Senate appropriations committees will work. Now, I say supposedly because we haven't had very many budget resolutions in recent years, and so it's always a sort of a. And that's been one of the reasons that budgets have been delayed in recent years, because we can't even get as far as an overall agreement on a budget. But anyway, nonetheless, the appropriations committees usually do their work, and what they get a general allocation under a budget resolution, and then the appropriations committees on the Senate and House side will divvy up that overall budget into the jurisdictions of the various appropriations committees, and there are about 13 of them. And then those subcommittees will start working on and put together appropriation bills that recommend spending amounts for the various programs within the federal budget. And then they go through their process of hearings, and then they do their markups and go to the floor and their amendment process. So in that sense, it's the process is the same as for the other kinds of bills that I was just talking about before. Now, NOFAS has gotten involved in, usually at the subcommittee level, preparing requests for specific funding amounts within the programs that affect FASD, and proposing certain language that could go into a committee report that directs the agencies as to how they should spend the money. NOFAS submits those to friendly members of the House and Senate to submit as those members' own requests. Generally, that has worked pretty well, which is why you'll see that the funding that was in the charts that Tom showed is even there. Otherwise, I'm afraid there wouldn't be very much funding for FASD, except for maybe within NIAAA. But generally speaking, that's the way the appropriation process works. And I can answer questions later, but I think we should move along because we got lots to cover. So thank you for listening.
Okay, now we're to the meat of what the policy committee is focusing on until we are successful. I just wanted to add that we will not be limiting ourselves because there are lots of policy areas, and I've had discussions with some of the affiliate members specifically about putting making FASD as a disabling condition under IDEA, which could be on the table because the IDEA needs to be reauthorized as well. It's been, I think, since 2004. So just that. Okay, so summary of the legislation. We have been working for several months on the language of the bill that was introduced in the 116th Congress. And those numbers are Senate File 2879 and House Resolution 5790. And you can find that language on the NOFAS website. But we had the opportunity during this time, since Kate mentioned when COVID hit, we were on a roll. We, gotten the House bill introduced. I was out in DC for the State of the Union at the request of Representative Betty McCollum from St. Paul, who wanted to focus on FASD. So that was early February. And then, as we all know, COVID hit and then the George Floyd. So we were put on the back burner, but we're back. And we're going to have a better bill. I've had the opportunity to know Dr. Sally Anderson through my work on the ICCFASD Justice Work Group. And she's retired as the executive secretary, and she'd been there since, I think, 2004. And we've gotten to know each other. So I enlisted her help, and which was good, because if you recall, this legislation was based on previous bills that had been introduced by Senator Murkowski and Senator Klobuchar. And, the field changes and agencies, focus changes. So she's one person in the federal government that really knows the issue as well as the agency. She's the one. So we've spent a lot of time reviewing that bill. And just so you know, when I first started on the NOFAS board, I reviewed, in my leisure, looking up the code, federal code, to see, if we had authorization language. And as Kate mentioned, it's all expired. So currently there is no authorization language for any programs on FASD. And my son-in-law works for the Department of Defense, and he was told during the Trump administration that they were working towards getting to a system where everything has to be authorized or it's not going to be appropriated. So, this is critical, I feel, is that we need to have a national agenda on FASD along with resources, and that's what this bill does. So, it will be a better bill. There are a couple of notable changes. I'll just note those at the top. And one of the things that we did was added prenatal exposure to other harmful substances in various sections of the bill. And I think what that does is reflect reality, but it also will bring in other authors who have been particularly interested in the opioid and neonatal. So I think it'll make a broader appeal to congressmen. And so, and then the one thing we did after talking with Sally is the original bill had the ICC-FASD become a public-private advisory group. But what that did was take away what they've been doing with the federal agencies, and we didn't want to do that. So what this bill does basically is take the task force that expired, if you all remember the National Task Force, and turn it into an National Advisory Committee on FASD. But it gives them new functions and advisory. And we've got a little bit different membership. So those, but the goal, and the appropriations, we increased the amount of appropriations from 42 million to 50 million. And I just want to say one thing about appropriations, because I know, and we haven't gotten to the sections. People say, well, 50 million, that's a lot. But if, one of the things when we were doing the legislation in Minnesota, where we got 10 million when we first started, is that you're paying the money now for failed outcomes. And so it's prevention, but it's intervention, and it's designed to lessen the incidents as well as those that have failed outcomes. So, and that's what we tried to do with meeting with staff and Congress. But so the definition, and I think that is very important, and what we intended to do with this all throughout the bill. There's a definition of fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And then if you look at the bill as you go through it, you never see that again. You see FASD, because I think in this issue, there's a lot of confusion with all the different acronyms. And I think the more we're consistent with that acronym, and this sets the stage for that. So there's a number of programs under Section 2 and NIAAA. That's basically what they're doing now. So that's not, it's just authorizing it, but they've committed. I mean, you can see from Tom's slides that they've committed to the research, and that's important. We have to have the research. And then surveillance, public health, research, and prevention, that's CDC. And that's really the bulk of the FASD funding. And that's primarily prevention and understanding the depth of the problem. And there's not a lot for what we think of as intervention. So you get to the building state FASD systems, and this was originally in the bill that Lisa Murkowski and Senator Klobuchar introduced. And this is where HRSA comes in. And what it does, it provides block grant funding to states, and they have to have a strategic plan. They have to have an advisory group, and then they get some money that they can get for certain purposes. And those are in the bill, and we haven't changed those, although we did add the language I talked about earlier with the adding exposure to other prenatal substances. So that's an opportunity for FASD advocates in their states to get involved and be at the table. In fact, I think part of the language in that section allows whoever an advocacy group has to be at the table, but also can be subcontracted to help do this work. So I think at another forum we can go into more depth on how that language. And then the community partnership piece is, I think, really an important piece, because what that does we've got systems in our local communities and states are so complicated, and there's a lot of funding streams and all, but for some reason, FASD is left out of the equation for various reasons, disability requirements. And so what this does, it provides some funding to different groups that you apply to HRSA for, to figure out how you can incorporate FASD prevention and intervention into your programming. So it gets engulfed into those existing systems of care for people. Okay, so then now we're down to development of best practices. And this again was another provision in the bill. If there are good practices out there, the old Center for Excellence, there were a lot of funding, and there were communities that did best practices and then they were lost. And so when we get to the Center for Excellence, there's funding to help replicate that, but this is to let those communities, states, there's different groups that can apply for this money, but they will in different areas for education and training, and then those can be replicated to other areas of the country. And then transitional services, we all know, and that's also HRSA. And there's a whole laundry list of services that really are important for those youth with FASD that transition to adults. And I think one of the things we added to that section, if I remember correctly, was providing funds for so they could have mentors, trained mentors. And I think, Dr. Sally Anderson thought that was an excellent addition. So, okay, I think we can go to the next. And then services for individuals with FASD. Now, this was actually in one of, it was, I think Senator Murkowski, this was, goes to SAMHSA. So this, but it's may language, it's not shall, because it was in legislation, it was 20 million itself, because these are actual services that individual with FASD, and we'll share those. We didn't really change that. So you can go on NOFAS website and get that, but that's SAMHSA and CSAP. And that language, you can see what services those are, but we also, I think, included mentors in that. And then there's two sections that are requiring both the Departments of Education and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention to do a nationwide surveillance, as well as to provide for leadership on identification, intervention, and services for those with FASD in the education and juvenile justice systems. So there's no funding necessarily, but they're being directed to do it. And this is the National Advisory Council on FASD that I talked about. It's going to be a 17-member advisory council, and it's to bring together, there's 4 agency folks on that, as well as someone with FASD or a family member of someone with FASD. There's someone from the state advisory groups, there's from advocacy groups, research, academic bodies, community groups. So it's a wide range of folks that will have the task of developing a national agenda on FASD, and they're going to review the previous task force report, and they're going to make recommendations and how we're doing. So I think this is, and they'll be working with the ICC FASD, and that's section 4 below, and they, if you've been involved with ICC FASD, they used to do a lot more work than they're doing now because they don't have the resources. So we're giving them some resources. If you've been in this field, you know that the whole issue with NDPAE, that was an initiative that was taken on by the ICC FASD. And then finally, we've got the Center for Excellence. And we all, if you've been in this field, you know, we have the Center for Excellence. This is going to be, we made a change. This will be up to 4 contracts for the Center for Excellence, and there's four different areas that we're focusing on. One obviously is public awareness, a national effort on public awareness on prevention, as well as helping those that have been impacted by FASD. There's a section on resources and training, and then a section on technical assistance. And that's where what we've learned through the communities, through the pilot programs that we talked about earlier and the communities of care, they're going to provide technical assistance to other communities and communities around the country to be able to do the same thing, so we don't lose it. Just, you know, we had funding on Hennepin County District Court had funding from that. We did screening in juvenile justice, but all that was lost when the center went, and there was, because there was no vehicle for that to be utilized. So I think this will be a much more improved Center for Excellence. So I know that was a quick review, and we'll go over in more detail, I think, in a future forum on different sections. And then we can answer some questions and answers here. I can do that. And again, 50 million a year, and then an allocation of funding for the Advisory Council and ICC FASD.
Susan, thank you. I was just going to repeat what you had said, that this information is on the NOFAS website, where you can get a complete summary of this outline that Susan just covered, and the bill text from the 116th Congress, both the bill in the House and the Senate. So from the NOFAS homepage, if you scroll down to where it said the icon that says policy and legislation, you can go there, get the rationale and summary, which matches up to this information and then all the materials from the previous Congress. Okay, Susan, thank you. Now we're going to turn it over to another member of the Center and the NOFAS Legislative and Policy Team, and the member of the NOFAS Executive Committee, who has also been a chief of staff up on Capitol Hill and many other positions in and around Washington, Mike Anderson. Mike, are you there?
I sure am. Can you hear me okay?
There he is.
Okay, good. You can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. So just for everybody, hi, everybody. I'm just glad to be here. I've been with NOFAS, I don't even know how many years. I just remember going to one of those presentations or one of the galas here in the DC area and thinking to myself, what? People have kids that because of fetal alcohol syndrome, because they're drinking alcohol when they're, and I didn't understand it. I couldn't, so I knew Kate, and Kate got me involved, and I've been there ever since. So this is just one of the things that I think is important to give back. I think it's an important thing. I don't have any children or any family that are affected by it. But this is an important issue. So my job is, in this particular thing, is to kind of get you all thinking through this thing called advocacy. Some folks will call it lobbying. I'm going to tell you that neither of those words should be bad words, because, you know, when you say your First Amendment rights, a lot of folks forget the little last sentence of it, and that is to petition the government for a redress of grievances, and advocacy and lobbying fall into that category. So it's our constitutional right to go ahead and do that. So the next time you think about that L word and stuff that's there, and there is a difference. And I sent out a little thing to everybody that kind of went through, I'm not going to read the differences, but fundamentally, advocacy is just getting out there and education. And when you think of advocacy, you think of educating, you know, you provide that. But when you talk about influencing and providing specific legislation and actually do that, you step into a line that many will say is called lobbying. And we have to be careful about that, particularly 501c3 groups, because you can lose your 501c3 by lobbying. You can't by advocating. So just remember, when we go to the Hill, we're advocating, we're advocating, we're advocating. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I've come to realize with 21 years of experience on the Hill, and yes, I do come home every day when I go to the Hill, and I take good hot showers, because you never know, what kind of things you're going to run into. But I will tell you, and I'll assure you this: I have found that constituent issues are foremost on members' minds, because in the end, that's who they were sent there for. They were sent there because of you all, and you all voted for them, and they're supposed to represent us. So particularly if we can connect the dots between an issue that we know is important and has effects upon their constituency, and tie that to something to help them fix it, those are very important things. That's a very important thing. And that was advocacy fundamentally does, because it's about evidence-based policy. It's about, here's the issue, here's the evidence, here's what we think we need to do to fix the problem, and we go forward. So I'm going to kind of lead off with that. Let me see the next slide. I'm sorry, I got to say next slide. Kathy said something the other day that I know I wrote it down somewhere. I can't, but it reminded me of, she said bank shots. Sometimes, when you're playing pool, for those of us who have played pool, you play pool, and there's those shots that you make, and ball on ball, ball goes in pocket, right? You hope that hit a ball, ball hits the other ball, ball goes in pocket. Sometimes we think of combo shots. Ball hits one ball, that ball hits another ball, and that ball goes in the pocket. But sometimes you get those things that are called bank shots. And sometimes those things are just awesome, because maybe you planned on it, but I don't know about you. First of all, I don't play great pool, but getting those bank shots and those things happening. Well, we're bank shots. We're folks that can go out there and make an impact. We're folks that can go out there, and I can talk to you. You'll go and talk to two people. Those two people will talk to two more. And pretty soon, exponentially, there's a lot of folks that are doing that. And sometimes you don't even have to talk. All you've got to do is post it on your social media, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or whatever you want to do. But you post that, and suddenly those things almost take a life of its own. You hit send, an email. You send an email to a group of people, and boom, it's gone. Suddenly it takes a life of its own. And having ownership for that, how that does, and making sure that you've got an idea what you want to do, what you're trying to do, how you want to make that positive impact is very important. So that kind of goes into, what do you expect as your role as an advocate, right? And what I always found that's been most effective is just telling your story. A lot of folks sit there and go, I don't know how to talk to some staff, right? I don't know how to talk to a congressman. What do I do? Tell your story. You have a story. You have something to tell. You have something to give. And whether it's evidence-based or anecdotal, which is evidence, it's a real story. And those are the stories that you should be telling. Describe how you're affected by FASD. Why is FASD important to you? And when you have that, and you're like, I know, there's how many people on board, like 47 folks on board right now, 46 excluding me. For each of us 47, it's very important to us. It's important to us. You wouldn't be this time, and frankly, you wouldn't even be listening to me or Kate or Tom if taking time out of your day, and we thank you for that, to do that. What it becomes incumbent on us is to maintain an up-to-date and accurate knowledge of FASD. So just keep on doing it. Keep on giving, because you know what? You go to the Hill, and there's nobody that knows your story better than you. There's nobody that knows the data better than you. There might be some folks that show up there that are doctors, but the last time I checked, usually those folks that have been doctors and have been given care and therapists and all that stuff, they're not making the $40,000 a year that an average salary that a staffer makes. They're making a lot more. They're out there actually helping people who really need, not helping with the public. So just to remember that, contribute your perspective. That's important. And when those things come out, and I get reminded by Kate a lot, because sometimes I'll see something and I'll wait probably to the last minute and put in your perspective. But when you have a perspective, take time to look at the document and understand. And I can see by some of the questions, how do we questions that were asked on the chat thing. I'm wondering, how do I do? How do I contribute? How do I do this? So stay connected with NOFAS, follow the status of this active legislation, and that's part of what this forum is going to do and what we want to do. As a Native American, one of the Tecumseh Chief Tecumseh had a great statement. He said, a single twig breaks, but a group of twigs, a group of branches is strong. And you all know that. So us by our one person going to the hill is just a twig, but with the group of us getting together and united in what we want to do and how we want to do it, that becomes a strong force. So like I said, continue to grow our expertise. But the thing that happens here and we get caught up is we get caught up in different messaging. So somebody from the state of Washington who's got an awesome program, and somebody from my state of Hawaii who's also got an awesome program, but you have different interests, you have different cultural effects, you're situated differently, you've got different demographic, those things are the intangible kinds of things that affect in your state adjust for that program, those differences. But you're going to walk to the hill and you're supposed to get the same unified message. I guarantee you it's not without coordination, not without talking. So I think if you take a look at this legislation that's out, what Susan helped me understand, this is about a national agenda for FASD. We've kind of lost the bubble on that. And like anything that has to do with our, with healthcare or anything else, if it has national implications, it needs a national agenda to get everybody focused at the right point, everybody walking down together. Not maybe not necessarily holding hands, but at least going in the same direction together, right? Herding cats, pushing them all down the same direction. So we've got to have a unified message. And the other thing about role as advocacy is make sure you establish and you nurture the relationships with your elected officials and your staff. When I worked on the Hill, I asked, my member was on an influential member on the transportation and infrastructure. And, one of the questions that came up during one of the discussions was, well, it's going to be a Republican money that's going to go into this road and it's a Democrat district and and he stopped everybody. He said, I want you guys to go out to my window, and he had a window, that thing. He says, and he stopped them. He says, I want you to look out there. They looked and he says, can you tell me whether that road's a Republican road or a Democrat road? He made his point. This is not a Republican agenda or a Democrat agenda. We've got to be sensitive to those kinds of things within each member, and each member has different sensitivities, absolutely. But you've got to know who that person is, and you've got to understand where they come from and where their staffs are come from. Generally, their staffs are a reflection of the members' perspective, the members' priorities. So we've got to do that. And while we're doing that, just make sure we get other advocates to join our cause. That's very important. I'm going to take a risk and ask. I'm going to ask you to kind of write your questions down or send them on there, and then we'll take up the questions as we go, because I already can see I'm getting some questions that are happening. So next slide. So let's get this party started, right? Let's get going. We've got stuff to do. So the intent of this slide, because it goes through a litany of things that we need to do to create, advance, and fund a national FASD agenda. But we already understand who the people that have sponsored this before. Well, wait a minute, Mike. Don't we already have legislation? Yeah, but we're going to have to kind of restart. We got to kick it because it's got some new words. It's got some different ideas, some things that we've learned and evolved over time. So we've got to go back to the same folks that have that. So, and Heather, if you have any questions, I know you're leaving, but appreciate that, what you do in Colorado. That being said, you have co-sponsors and likely sponsors. That's who we got. But in the end, it's about asking your senator or your representative to co-sponsor it. And the way you do that is you contact your health assistants by email or call. I just did that today. I called a guy by the name of Dave Chun in Congressman Kahele's office in the state of Hawaii. I happen to know the congressman personally. And I said, hey, Dave, can I forward this information to you about this? And he said, sure. And he's the health LA. So boom, that's all you do. Or you call. And if you don't know who that is, you call the office, you Google it, or you've got my information on the bottom. You can call me, text me, or drop me an email. And I'll be very glad to do that. To do that. I can tell you who your congressperson is with your address and your zip code. If you need that information, if you need your senator's information, I'll be glad to pass that information to you and research it and get it down to that, because some of that can get complicated. But we've got to do this probably by around mid-February. Why? The budget comes out, the president's budget submission hits the Hill around the early part of February. It might be a little bit later, but you kind of want to get ahead of the money thing. You know, you just kind of want to call them and talk to them, get this legislation, because this legislation has two parts. It has an authorization side, and there'll be an appropriation side. You'll have a leave behind, but we're going to have to tailor that. And for example, if I say something in there, if that tailored leave behind is something that has nothing to do with how you know your state or your district handles it, you're clear to go ahead and maybe kind of tailor it. You might even put the congressman person's name on it, kind of a thing. But it's important to tailor it versus being generic. There'll be a copy of the legislation, summary of the provisions. And after you've met, there's a follow-up that you should do. You know, hey, did you get my email? I mean, not after you met, after you've asked for did you get my email? You know, you got my email. Are there questions I can help you with? And when should I contact you next? This is a good part of retail business. You know, you don't just make the contact, the cold call, and just kind of leave it there. If you really want to get them, you gotta ask some questions that force people to commit to take action. Are there other offices you think I can't contact to help? There's a network on that Hill. It is a huge, just no different than the networks you enjoy in your hometowns, in the places, the communities where you live. There's a network on the Hill, and they talk to each other. The next thing I would not do is I wouldn't worry about, the thing that you find out, and you know, one of the things when I worked on the Hill, the naive me said, well, I don't understand why the congressman doesn't know about this. Well, I don't understand why the staff doesn't know that this legislation was happening. I don't understand why the staff doesn't understand that this was happening to who and this priority is going on in the state. What you find out is the staff is just as dependent on that network to get that information. While they'll be some of the smartest folks you'll ever meet in understanding an issue, because they're generally just out of college or they've been working an issue for years, but they may not be 100% aware of everything. So sometimes it's good just to walk by and send them an update and say, hey, can I give you a little update about this? That's really appreciated. And I guarantee you it makes a person listen a little bit more when they find out, hey, I've got a source that's connected here back in my home state that I can talk to about this issue, because that helps them advocate for you. Okay, next slide, please. The one prior. These are quick how-to. You got to know your audience. There's research you got to get done. You got to anticipate the questions. You got to know your ask, your message, your story. You've got to organize it, practice it, refine it. If a number of you are getting ready to meet, assign a role to each to speak to. It's so typical. You get 4 people in and you maybe 3 people. And the first question is, so how does that affect you? First person says, well, it affected me this way. Next person goes, yeah, it affected me this way. Then one goes, that affected me that way. One person can take the whole thing and say, here's the impacts of that. Give everybody a role to speak to, and one person is assigned to take notes. Somebody's got to take notes as to what's happening on the meeting. Next thing is prioritize your ask and message up front, particularly if you have a meeting with the member, it's him or herself, because they no doubt might be able to show up for 3 minutes and then they got to go. They've got to go vote. They got to do another part of the job, or they got to go to a hearing, another part of their job, or they have another meeting that they're trying to take at the same time because they got a lot of meetings that day, another part of their job. So what you've got to do is make sure you prioritize what you want to do up front. Now this is easy. We've got pretty much one ask. This is this legislation, but let's say you walk in with 3 or 4 asks. Make sure the number one ask is the first one you're asking for. Don't wait and build it up to the last. Okay, I want it, because you may not get that member to hear it. So be prepared for interruptions and shorter time than anticipated. A great meeting is one that you're scheduled for 30 minutes and goes an hour and a half. I've been fortunate to have a few of those, but they're rare. That means they're really interested. They really want to get there, and they're really interested in your questions. Next thing is get your meeting requests early. A week in advance is not going to work. Guaranteed. I mean, even if you're traveling to the state, even if from the state, the point is get it out there. It was typical that we started working the next 2 weeks. We worked our schedules 2 weeks in advance, and then finalized it the week in advance. It was boom, it's done. Here's the meeting. It's done. So you got to start at least 2 weeks in advance to make sure the scheduler and the staffer and then follow up on your requests after a couple of days. If they haven't answered you, hey, I sent you an email, was wondering, and just pick up the phone and call, or try to get a message to them, and just they're getting busy, just like we all do, but follow up on your requests. In the days of electronics, it's particularly since we're now going to more pretty much for all virtual meetings, that the Hill's pretty much closed right now to face-to-face meetings. Send your meeting materials in advance. Always a good practice. Send it to advance, which means you gotta think through. All right, get that well in advance. And then when you send it to them, what I do is says, hey man, don't forget, I'm sending you this. I hope this is helpful. I think this will be helpful. Looking forward to meeting you at 10 a.m. this coming Thursday. Because sometimes it happens, it kind of slips. And that way they'll be reminded, and they'll have that. Number one, they'll feel thankful you sent the materials in advance. Number two, they are reminded, you've reminded them in a very nice way.
Okay.
So when you put this all together, what's a good standard approach? And it's very easy. You got to lead. The lead walks in. The lead's the one that says thank you. The lead the one says members help. They introduce the advocates. There might be some small talk. Oh, you're from Peoria. Oh, well, do you know, blah, blah, blah. Those things will happen. And those are good discussions to happen, because that shows the connection, okay? And the more connected you are in other ways, the better the relationship building. It's no different than what we go through every day, whether we're going to church, the grocery store, going to play sports, whatever. You look for the connections with the people that you deal with, right? Okay. Ask if they have, and then the last thing is, hey, by the way, I want to make sure you got the materials. If they don't, you better have some on hand in nice little folders, printed, ready to go, hand it to them. Okay. Assign some roles, make your ask, tell your story, your case. Somebody takes notes. Once you've done that, make sure you listen. You listen to what they have to say and take notes on that. Seek to understand while you're increasing their awareness. Seek to understand. First, seek to understand while you know what their weaknesses are, what their concerns are going to be, and so forth. The last thing is the lead advocate kind of comes back up and says, hey, thank you for the meeting today. Here's what I think I heard you say. Number one, we owe you this. Number two, you're going to get us this. Can you tell me again when we should expect that? Okay, got it. Thank you. Take notes. And what more information can I get you to help with this? Who else could we be speaking to about this? What other member on the Hill? What other staffers that we should be talking to? And can you kind of give us a little intro to them so that we kind of get that little support kind of a thing? And how can we keep you in the loop on this issue as this legislation goes through? Because boy, your help's going to be awesome. We can really appreciate that. That is what I think is important, and those are the how-tos. And I have a feeling this is going to generate some questions. And Tom, if you would like me to, I can also look at the other questions that have been generated on this, and I can, since you helped me through the presentation, I'd be glad to help you with that and kind of going through that.
Mike, thanks very much. Let me just be aware that we have crossed over the top of the hour, but the NOFAS team is going to stay online here for those of you who can do so as well. Again, remind everyone, please mute yourself. We do hear a little background noise. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking. And in a moment, you will have a chance to speak. A couple of housekeeping items. So in upcoming Monday, NOFAS Weekly Roundup, will include the link to this presentation. Please forward that throughout your network. Some of you have asked for the slides. We'll make those available as well on the NOFAS website. And also on the NOFAS website, there'll be a link for a sign-up form so that you can just submit to NOFAS your name and information, the name of your member of the House, and there is a web address in there if you need to look that up quickly. And then just a couple of check boxes where you can acknowledge your connection to this issue, whether or not you may already have a relationship with any members of your congressional delegation, and just to check a box to acknowledge that you want to receive all the notifications for these upcoming meetings, the forum meetings, and all updates and information related to our advocacy efforts. So let me do this Mike, in response to your question, let me ask the first question from the typed in questions. Then let's invite people to go ahead and just unmute yourself, and you can kick around your thought and your question as you like. But this question came in just some time ago as we were talking, and from our leader, the field's leader in North Carolina, Amy Hendricks, and she brings up an important point where she sort of asks if we foresee any challenges moving legislation due to the need for funding to address the pandemic. And is there a way to maybe attach our effort to any future COVID legislation? So I'll put that out there for you, Mike, and Kate, Susan, anyone to respond.
Well, I'll jump in because we did talk about that. Dr. Anderson and I did, and she sent me a lot of information about the increase of drinking, particularly with women during this pandemic. So I think if we could turn this into an opportunity rather than a hindrance. And so I'm starting to collect all those studies that have happened and how it impacts those with disabilities. And I think if you have any of that information in your states or you've collected, it would be helpful to have that, because I mean, they are having to put a lot of money into the COVID response. And I think we need to draw that connection that it really is hurting. It's gonna, the increased use of alcohol and how it affects those that are disabled is going to be a lot more dramatic than the general population. So,
and how many more FASD babies will be born?
Right, exactly.
I just wanted to make one comment. We did explore, and Susan took the lead on that, the possibility of trying to get some FASD related funding into earlier COVID bills. I think that as appealing as that might be, I think it's really a very difficult task to accomplish, because there's already a lot of pushback on additional funding, and I think it's going to be mostly vaccine related. But the reason Susan is collecting this, and rightly so, is that we can make a good case for regular year funding and to advance this legislation. And I just want to urge everybody to fill out the forms and respond as Tom has instructed as soon as possible, because we would really like to have the help of affiliates in all the states and advocates, particularly in some key states, to help with making contact with senators and congressmen in order to recruit as many co-sponsors of this legislation in both the House and Senate as possible, and really push to move the legislation. And you won't be operating on your own. NOFAS will be sending out the summary, the bill, some talking points, and we can also draft, the initial emails that go to request the meeting and do all the steps that Mike was talking about. So it's not that difficult to initiate the meeting, and then you're on your own in terms of making the pitch. But I know a number of you have done this already, and you're the best advocates, no question about it, because you have personal experience that you can bring to bear and explain to the member why it's so important to move this legislation. So thanks for your help.
So we'll ask for questions. I just want to acknowledge just also Catherine Shea, who's a member of the Policy and Legislative Committee. She's on the line, also integrate or important member of bringing the Florida Center for Early Childhood Development onto the NOFAS, into the NOFAS family as an affiliate. And also Andy Ketcher, some of you know him here at NOFAS. And you probably don't know Juliana, who is also with NOFAS and is going to be a helpful to this process as a contact person. So we will, with everybody who's been on this call, follow up so that you are very clear as to who you can contact, who you should contact. As Kate said, some of you are very experienced in this. Some of you are not. You all, though, are going to be important to the effort. So NOFAS will be here to work with you as necessary. So any other questions today?
Tom, I know there was a chat question on the Center for Excellence, because the previous center was with SAMHSA. And frankly, that was trying to decide where that would be housed was a challenge. And so the language in the bill has the HHS secretary in consultation with the Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use and HRSA and the chair of ICC-FASD and the director of CDC making those awards. So it's the secretary in consultation with those. So they are all going to have input into how those contracts will be administered.
Do you have any idea where they might go and what the criteria will be?
Pardon me?
Do you have any idea where their Center for Excellence might be and what the criteria for placement will be?
Well, there'll be up to 4 contracts. Now, the previous center, the same legislation said 4 contracts, and they ended up with 1. And we wanted to have the experts make that decision, not just the secretary make that decision, but in consultation with, the chair of ICC-FASD, and CDC and HRSA, because those are the agencies that are primarily going to be responsible for this legislation. So they need to make that decision as to which agency is the best agency to administer the up to 4 contracts. We're hoping there will be 4, so and to do the different, we broke the center's responsibilities into very distinct areas. And one of the most important areas is increasing diagnostic capacity, because I know with the affiliates, that was one of the issues that as in training judges, is you can train everybody, but if you don't have the diagnostic capacity, you're not going to go anywhere. So that's one of the prime responsibilities of that will be the new Center for Excellence, is to increase that diagnostic capacity.
Just to be clear, is the Center for Excellence a place, or is it a group of agencies in different geographical areas?
Well, Tom, you may, there is no place. I mean, it's right now it's responsibility. So it depends on how it's administered through this contracts that they're going to, I mean, you had Northrop Grumman administer it before, but there was really no place. There was no physical place. It was all staffing and, virtually. So they're going to have to submit contracts, and they're going to have to do what is required in the legislation for those areas.
I'm just wondering what we can do to push it for our geographic region, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah,
well,
go ahead.
Could I add just, the second half of our effort to first being to get something authorized and then funds appropriated will be to, continue to build relationships with the agencies so that they, because there will be some room for interpretation should we be successful with the legislation. And we saw that before. I think Kate was the one who mentioned that it's been 20 some years since there was authorizing language. And at that time, decisions were made to some of the agencies, which might not have tracked right along with what advocates had intended in thinking about the legislation. So once again, I mean, that could be a situation here. So there are a lot of unknowns as to what agency might administer a Center for Excellence. Would there be separate centers, or would that be consolidated into one center that was a single grant or contract could be a a number of folks. It could be a agency or an organization with a university, and then some NOFAS affiliates, for instance, have a part of that. But those things are unclear. That's why education, ongoing education, is so important.
Thank you.
For those of us that are in key states, are there any additional steps or additional information that we should have in terms of approaching our legislators, and any additional guidance, things we should do or should not do?
Yes, absolutely. And I think maybe Kate, Susan, and Mike might have something to add to this too. But what we'd like to do is, and do plan to do, is coordinate specific calls or meetings like this with delegations in your state, Jan, in Washington, and California, some other key states, so we can really very specifically understand what districts people live in, who they may know, who needs to be targeted. There may be some specific tailored messages. And also remember, the timing is a factor here too. Where are we in the process? Is the bill language completed? Have we started the outreach to co-sponsors? Not to say that there ought not be outreach prior to that, because we want to establish those relationships. So yes, so Jen, so you're going to be a key person in helping to round up the folks in Washington, for instance. And, we'd like to start doing this just in the coming days. So I will talk with you about that. And again, I don't know, Kate, Mike, Susan, if you have anything to add to that.
I would just add that I had mentioned when I spoke how important Senator Patty Murray is, because she will be taking over she is the chair now of the Senate Help Committee, which is the committee that will handle this legislation. And she's also the chair of the subcommittee that funds these programs. So she's really important. And so the more personal contact we can make. The other thing about Patty Murray is that she's one of the senators who really only likes to meet with people from her state. So it doesn't do any good for me, although I had originally got to know her because I had worked for a congressman from Washington State, but that was a lot of years ago. So it's really important to have that personal connection. Now in California, we're fortunate to have two affiliates, and we've got some very key people. Obviously, the new HHS secretary, former Congressman and Attorney General Becerra, is from California, so he will be important. But also Anna Eshoo, Congresswoman Eshoo, is chair of the Health Subcommittee in the House Commerce Committee, and that's the subcommittee that will have jurisdiction over this legislation. So if she gets personal input from her constituents or people from her state who really care about this issue and can explain the different aspects and what they've been involved in and why it's important to get this moving, and it's lapsed for so long, it's sort of languished for so long, we're really anxious to get this moving, that will really help.
There are a couple of questions. If I could just, you may have seen this, or you can see this in the chat, but I want to mention it because it's very helpful, from Emily Hargrove, who points out that she was on the last Center for Excellence expert panel and wrote the training and intervention protocols that were implemented throughout the country. And they were not geographic specific or based on geographic. So she added that to an earlier question about the center. Thank you. And then there's a question, how does the legislation connect with the plans of safe care? How does the FASD legislation connect with the plans of safe care legislation in the Children's Bureau? And I think I assume you mean the Maternal and Child Health Bureau at HRSA, although I could be wrong with that. I'm not sure that answer, and I don't know if our team, we can look into that, but I'm not sure, Susan, if you're aware of that.
I'm not, the answer, I guess, is there's no direct relationship, but I think by adding the language we did for prenatal exposure to other substances, and I think the section that deals with community partnerships and having FASD integrated into, because there's language in there that I think they could become, how do you do that? Because I know that there have been states that have, because of the safe care, have tried to incorporate FASD, but I don't know that it's worked. I'm not an expert on it, but what I've heard anecdotally, that it isn't doing what really needs to be done. So I think there's a lot of language in here that would provide the training and technical assistance on how to do that.
You know, I'm glad this question was raised, because I want to give some kudos to NOFAS, because 2 years ago, when the CARA Act was going through, we had legislation language that we wanted to get incorporated, and most of our really good language that is in our bill wasn't incorporated. However, we were successful in getting FASD included in a number of places in the plans of self-care. So I think it would really be helpful if there are folks who have any experience, and maybe we can also do some research to find out what has happened as a result of that language in there. And if nothing has, it actually gives us a reason to go back to Patty Murray and say, we really appreciate your having put that language in here, but it hasn't had any effect. And really what we need is this national agenda to create more context for that kind of language.
Well, there are a number of states that are making a fairly serious effort to implement the plans of safe care. I think that the targets that have been mentioned in the health agencies are appropriate, but the Children's Bureau and the child welfare universe sees an awful lot of infants removed at birth due to positive tox, and FASD is a significant part of that. So with legislation already in existence that requires that plan of safe care and emphasizes prenatal exposure, the trick would be to make sure that the FASD focus is included in that legislation as it gets implemented.
Hey, Tom, this is Amy in North Carolina. So as far as the CARA Act and any state plans of safe care within individual states, just like Mr. Gardner just said, you know, in some states have been successful in at least writing their own plan of safe care, and North Carolina has been one of those plans, and FASD is included, that language is included, but the problem is even bigger and does tie back into these national efforts, because when we were bringing FASD to the front, one of the biggest things was, well, where do we get them identified? How are they diagnosed? Where's the support? All those types of things. So I think we can tie it in that this will help fill in some of those missing pieces that were not met, because that was a mandate encouraging, say, for instance, in our state, Child Protective Services to continue to get their funding. And if they didn't scramble quickly and write a plan of safe care, they would be subject to losing that funding. So I think that there are efforts, but a lot of that has to do with the diagnostic piece and then developing supports for families.
Amy, thank you so much for that. We'll put out one last call for questions, but before I do, I want to recognize Barb Weibrecht, because I think, you know, she has inspired all of us when it comes to FASD advocacy. You've been doing this a long time and very effectively. And so, Barb, good to see you. I don't know if you have a quick thought for us all.
I just wanted to have us think about some of the folks that are now adults, and we need their input too. And there were 2 adults on the steering committee, and I think it'd be good if we included them in any way we can, because they're the ones that will tell you that there's not very many services for adults with an FASD. And they're all growing up now. That transition to adulthood and losing services that they had when they were in high school or even post high school.
Yeah. Barb, I want to thank you for that. And one of the catches that I noticed from the previous bill is the Center for Excellence talked about children with FASD, and we changed that. So it's across the lifespan. So that's going to be included in the that's included in the new bill.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm curious as to how did you arrive at 50 million, and is there a way that it would be appropriated? Because with knowing that there's so many just like involved and incarcerated, it doesn't seem, it seems like it could be more than that, but maybe that's a good starting point.
Tom, do you want to take a stab at that? I can too.
The first thing to point out is that the intention is for there to be a $50 million appropriation over and above that number we talked about at NIAAA, which if you remember was around $29–30 million. So
Okay.
that is the hope, that's the intention to have the 50 million be over and above that number at CDC, HRSA, SAMHSA, and so forth. And it was really, we looked at the money that had been appropriated last time there was successful FASD legislation, around $27 million, adjusted that, and that was in 2001. Adjusted that for inflation, and also added some new components here in this bill. So that's roughly how we arrived at that figure. Of course, we want a lot more, and that is that's an important consideration that we rely on people like Kate and Mike, who understand the way the Hill works, to arrive at what number should that be to give us the best chance to succeed.
And is it like divided so much for research, so much for diagnostic clinics? What is there a formula that they're using to come up with that?
So
Well, the idea,
that's still on the table. We're talking about that with congressional staff, because right now it's for the 50 million for the programs. So we're going to talk to see whether we need to allocate certain amounts for different pieces of that bill. I know that the Center for Excellence was not part of that 27 million, and that was, when that was passed, that was 5 million for the Center for Excellence. It did get more after that. So we're going to have those discussions with the the staff and what they see as realistic.
And I know from reading on a lot of parent groups, there's a lot of concern on aging parents. That's what's going to happen to their adult children when they're no longer with us.
I wanted to say that in Santa Clara County, I put it in the chat, but we've succeeded, working at the national level is just really grand, but we decided to look at our county level, and that we've been successful in doing a cradle to grave kind of network that's been passed by the Board of Supervisors, that's going to go across all systems in addressing and education and addressing and interventions of FASD. And the latest piece that was just put in is asking that screening be done at booking into the jail. So reaching really high is just really wonderful, but reaching just locally and through the contacts that we have, we want to be a model for what can be done when a county embraces FASD as a piece of the population that really is central to so much failure in terms of housing, incarceration, education. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that mining those resources close to home sets into motion a lot of really good stuff that can be a model.
And it's great to have a replicable model that people could use elsewhere, so everybody isn't reinventing the wheel.
Right.
And that's the idea of the Center for Excellence, to be able to collect all that information and also provide the technical assistance and some resources to help replicate good systems, because that's what's happening. There's, we in Minnesota have done a lot with this issue, and those things should be replicated. And what this bill does is solve those problems. I mean, that have been part of this issue over decades, and providing resources to states that haven't done anything and helping with the diagnostic capacity. But So I think that's great. And I think if are you as part of the NOFAS, if you're affiliate, then those could be shared as well.
The other power piece of that is that our representative is Zoe Lofgren, and she knows those county supervisors, and she can talk with them, and they influence her at the top.
By the way, Barbara, thank you for that. I know that you've been involved in some of the important ongoing efforts in California with the attempt to authorize a task force and other areas. So you'll be invaluable, needless to say, in the effort here nationally. Couple more. I just want to quickly point out that in addition to our advocacy legislatively, speaking out, telling our stories is always so important. And just as we're talking today, and see the folks involved, I just want to mention two people who are doing that. Melissa Jacobus Cook, who I know you've written a memoir in which you chronicle, your experiences raising two children on the spectrum. It's very moving, very inspiring. I know that's coming out later this year. So I think that kind of thing really complements these efforts by putting a face on this issue. And I hope that's something that is out soon and can be circulated widely.
Yeah, we're working on it, hopefully in the next 3 months or even sooner. And also my son, who is going to be 30 in March, is going to take part in a type of video that is going to be a training video. So Tom, just to let you know that that's going to happen, and possibly my daughter Nadia, who will also be in the video. So we're just trying to stay active and give a face to this. So thank you for everything everybody is doing. Thank
Well,
you.
and you have two new senators in Georgia who I'm sure you've probably already engaged with.
I was working on that a couple of years ago, actually, when John Ossoff was trying to be elected. So getting right on top of that with everybody else.
Excellent. And Gigi Davidson, the founder and director of FASD Communities. And I know you have assembled a group of folks who are doing a documentary and are putting out PSAs. Again, I think another example of the types of materials that we all can help circulate.
We actually reviewed our PSA and we're refining it, but it should be out within the next couple of weeks, and we hope to disseminate it broadly.
Excellent. So any other questions? I think let's see if there are any questions, and then I think we ought to close by giving Kate and Mike and then Susan the last word here. But before we do that, any other questions?
Yes. What's the name of Melissa's book that's coming out?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The name of the book that you're publishing?
It'll be called The Accomplice.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing this call. It was great.
I just want to thank I want to thank you all for being on, and I hope you'll join us every month. Hopefully we won't take up half of your day with this, but it's been rewarding to see everybody and to hear you all. Thank you.
Will it always be the last Wednesday of the month?
Yes, indeed. Yes, the last Wednesday of the month, and it will be. In fact, this is set up as a recurring meeting, so it'll be the same link, but we'll post that on the website and continue to circulate that. You'll get all the invitations.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great. Anything lastly from Mike or Kate? In fact, can we close with Kate? Because Kate, you of people who've worked on this issue, you're the one that I think really knows how to, at the same time, kick people in the pants, but also motivate them and inspire them to move forward. So Mike, what do you say?
Well, I'll jump in and say I really am excited that so many people have participated today, and I thought the presenters did a good job. I hope we can set up some specific meetings, Zoom meetings coming up quickly with folks in Washington State and California. Those are two very key states, so we can strategize amongst ourselves without burdening everybody else with who knows who can go, what kind of bang shots we can put together, who can help get the right people behind this legislation so we can really get it moving. And I thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at the forum next month. And before that, we'll talk specifically about the work we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you all.